he found that for Mobile County alone, 37,000 voters had been made inactive. And so when many of those voters got to the polls on September 23rd, they didn't know what to do. And in some cases, municipal election officials didn't know what to do. Some allowed them the voters who were deemed inactive, to re-identify on the spot. Others allowed them to vote a provisional ballot, but there was just mass confusion. We heard from people who just left the polls in frustration. We cannot have that happen. And so my message now to your listeners and to all of my constituents is to go to AlabamaVotes.gov and check your voting status right now.
All righty, welcome back. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Boone, David Person, and we are happy to have with us, I think for the very first time, Representative Adline Clarke. Ms. Clarke, I believe this is your first time here, right?
It is indeed, gentlemen, but happy to be with you today.
It's our pleasure and our honor to have you on. It's I hear your name all the time. Because I talked to Anthony Daniels, I talked to other members there a lot, and I all the time hear about the work that you do and how respected that you are around the legislature, and so honestly, I don't know how in the world we've gone this long without having you on. I really don't. I mean, we've had Anthony on like 10 times. We should have certainly booted him for one of those times and got him out of there. There's nothing he needs to say.
Not at all. Not at all. Leader Daniels is amazing. If you've had him on 10 times, that's 10 times too few. You need him again and again. He is such a great minority leader. He's just such a great leader, period.
Listen, I'm going to say that I respect him a ton. I've said he is the politician that I most identify with in my life, that I think he's a great guy. But we can't put these things out publicly because they just go to his head, and then you just got to hear from him all the time, and it's just so annoying, I mean, really, it is. But hey, listen, I know we wanted to talk to you about some voting rights bills. Obviously, you're on the Democratic side, so you're all for voting, free and fair elections, and opening up to as many people as possible. And
my goodness, Josh, isn't everybody?
No, they're not. Look across the aisle where you're going to be in a little while, and you'll find lots of people who are not for that.
Well, you're exactly right, Josh, because I'm having difficulty even getting some of my voting bills on the agenda in the House Constitution Campaigns and Elections Committee. So you're exactly right.
How frustrating is that?
That's very frustrating, because I know that the bills that I'm trying to introduce that I have introduced, that I'm trying to get vetted in committee and passed by the full House and Senate, are bills that the people want. For example, one of my bills is an early voting bill, and there's no doubt in my mind that most voters in the state of Alabama would appreciate having more than a single day to vote at election time. We are one of only a handful of states in these United States that don't have some form of early voting. And I think that in this day and time, that is a pit and a shame.
Yeah. When you say a handful, I mean, you mean a tiny handful. I want to say we're one of like 5 or 6, if that many.
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right.
So, look, you've got a fantastic reputation around there among both parties. And people respect you a lot. So, what do they say to you when you say, "Look, these because the bills that you have are not outrageous bills. They're not some far left wing, sort of things. They are common sense voting rights bills." What do they say to you when they're trying to explain why they won't even let them see the light of day?
Well, the chairman of the Constitution Campaigns and Elections Committee just says he's not in favor of early voting. He don't think that we need it. And our Secretary of State, West Allen, has said repeatedly that that we only need election day, not election month. I don't get good answers, guys. I don't. And I know that with the dismal turnout that we have, time and time again at the polls, that we need to do something to make voting more accessible and to get more people involved in the electoral process.
Wow.
And there are practical reasons for that. In my district back home in Mobile, there are probably 5 or 6 different apartment complexes that are exclusively for senior citizens. And if it rains on election day, those voters are not, those seniors are not going to go out to vote. Many of them have mobility issues, and it's too big of a risk for them to go out on a walking cane or on a walker. And they also will tell you that if it's cloudy outside, that they aren't feeling well. And I'm starting to learn what they mean when they say when it's cloudy, their arthritis and other things start to bother them. Um, and then there could be a family emergency. There could be work issues. And even though the law provides that every citizen should have the right to go and vote, that doesn't always work like a charm. And so someone could be sick on election day and not make it to the polls. And there's no makeup day. If we had early voting, we would have an opportunity to get over those hurdles and go to exercise our right, our privilege to vote.
It's almost like they don't want that to happen.
Yep.
No, and it's sad because there are those who believe that it's because more Democrats would show up at the polls. I mean,
Yep.
let's look at the numbers. There, even if every Democratic voter participated because we had early voting, we're still a minority of voters in Alabama. I read, I think at the last presidential election, that the Secretary of State in Louisiana said that more Republicans took advantage of early voting in that state than Democrats. So I think everybody would benefit from being able to vote on more than a single day, that it would help to increase voter participation by Republicans, Democrats, independents, you name it. This bill is for the greater good. It is for everybody's good. It's for the good of the state of Alabama.
Yeah, it almost seems as though Representative Clarke, the Republicans are taking the position that if it ain't broke, we're not going to fix it in terms of what they want, because they're not, even though what you're saying is true about how it would open up more opportunities for all voters, because they're winning, they don't want to see the system changed. At least that's my opinion. But anyway, I want to ask you about what this portends for the people of Alabama, especially African Americans and other historically disenfranchised voters, because I get the sense, and most recently, I was, in fact, just this past Sunday, I was at an NAACP event in Limestone County as a panelist, and some of the sentiments that people were expressing was this a real concern about the vote and what is going to happen in the upcoming elections and for this year as well as for 2028. What do you see as you look into the future? Are you concerned about the ability of historically disenfranchised voters being able to exercise their right to vote?
Well, I am concerned, and primarily, David, because um, after Alabama did voter roll maintenance, which is something that federal law requires, as you gentlemen are well aware, over 400,000 voters in Alabama were made inactive. They were not purged from the list, but they were made inactive. And so let me use Mobile as a case in point. So statewide, there were many municipal, not all, but many municipal elections this summer. And so in August, we had people go and vote for our mayor and city council members with no problem. in August. They returned to the polls less than a month later in September and found that they were inactive. Our new probate judge, Mark Irwin, got to investigating, and he was not in charge of that municipal election. He's in charge of statewide elections, but he started getting calls. And so when he investigated, he found that for Mobile County alone, 37,000 voters had been made inactive. And so when many of those voters got to the polls on September 23rd, they didn't know what to do, and in some cases, municipal election officials didn't know what to do. Some allowed the voters who were deemed inactive to re-identify on the spot. Others allowed them to vote a provisional ballot, but there was just mass confusion. We heard from people who just left the polls in frustration. We cannot have that happen. And so my message now to your listeners and to all of my constituents is to go to AlabamaVotes.gov and check your voting status right now. Not on election day, but right now. And that's www.AlabamaVotes.gov. You click on the icon that says My Voting Information. Up at the top left-hand corner, it states whether you are active or inactive. And if you are inactive, all you got to do is update your voter registration right there on the spot. And it's so much easier to register and to update today than in yesteryear because you can do it using that cell phone in the palm of your hand. You can do it using a tablet, a laptop, a desktop. Now, there's still the horse and buggy way. You can still get an application, a paper application, fill it out, and return it. And then that's the best way if you don't have the necessary ID, because if you do it online, you do have to have either an Alabama driver's license or state-issued non-driver's license. But please help me spread the message here to get everybody to check their voter registration. They shouldn't, if they are inactive, they should not be denied the opportunity to vote when they get to the polls. But why risk it?
Right.
Why
No,
why
that's
why
great.
add to the
Yeah.
confusion? Be
Yeah, no,
ready to vote.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. That's awesome, and we'll definitely continue to drive that home. You know, it almost strikes me as being reminiscent of what Lee Atwater talked about. I think he was on his deathbed, if I remember correctly, when he said this. The great, not the great, but the very successful conservative Republican political operative, who said that basically. And he said this, I think, some 20 or 30 years ago. I can't remember exactly. Probably 30 years ago. You know, we can't use the N word anymore, but we can find other ways to disenfranchise this voting populace. And I feel like that's what's happening right now. That with these purges or these attempts to make voters inactive. You know, they can't really implement a poll tax. You know, they're trying to use voter ID in some cases, but they can't.
Well, they're trying to implement a poll tax right now with the SAVE Act.
Well, they are. Yeah, that's true. That's a great point, Josh. If successful, successful, that's what it would end up being, as a de facto poll tax. But at least for now, they can't do that, and there are other restrictions, and they can't, you know, some of the Jim Crow tactics they can't use, but they're finding some end around ways to accomplish the same thing. Do you think am I being hyperbolic here or overly paranoid?
No, not at all. But you know, the ironic thing about it is that the two gentlemen who have served as Secretary of State during my tenure in the Alabama House, in the Alabama legislature, have touted our voter system as being very secure, that it is one of the safest and most secure systems in the nation. And so, yet we talk about voter fraud. If it exists at all, it's very little voter fraud in the state of Alabama.
Right.
And I'm not so naive as to think that you aren't going to have somebody try to get more votes than they may be entitled to. you all probably remember that the legislature passed SB 1, Senate Bill 1, back a few years ago, that was to prohibit so-called ballot harvesting. You know, there are people who go out and represent us as candidates, incumbents and new candidates, to try to get as many absentee people to vote by absentee ballot as often as they can. But that is the voter's right to vote by absentee ballot.
Right.
It is a violation of the law if somebody abuses, that absentee voting system. It may happen, but not to a large scale, not to the
So
point that we should prevent people or make it harder for people to vote by absentee ballot. And one of my
so
bills, David,
yeah.
before I forget,
Okay.
you're the youngest, so but before I forget, one of my bills is to help to make it easier for disabled and elderly, blind, and intellectually challenged voters to get assistance with voting by absentee. Have you all ever voted by absentee ballot? It
I
almost
have
takes
not.
a college degree to be able
Yes.
to complete that process. I did it one time and declared I'd never do it again, not by
Mm.
paper. I have gone to vote, and I hope that your listeners know that you can go and vote absentee in person. And it's
Yes.
far less confusing because you got people there to help you. But if you
Right.
do it manually, even trying to figure out what there are 3 envelopes. You complete your ballot, you put it in a secrecy envelope. The secrecy envelope goes in an affidavit envelope that goes in a mailing envelope. And when I had to complete that process, I was thoroughly confused, sitting there trying to figure out what envelope, what goes where.
Yeah. And now
Wow.
we've
It is
criminalized
very
anybody
confusing.
going and helping those people to do that. We've criminalized that. And we're actually putting
Exactly.
people in jail right now for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so SB 1 prevents us, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, church members, it neighbors, it prohibits us from being good Samaritans and helping the elderly and disabled folk from exercising their right to vote. One of my
Sure.
constituents is former State Representative Joseph Mitchell, who his mind is sharp, very sharp, but he is bedridden. His late wife would take her absentee ballot application and his to our absentee election manager's office. They would accept hers, and she would check the box that says that I'm a caregiver, but they would not accept her husband's application from her. And she was his primary caregiver. They're right there under the same roof. Dr. Mitchell couldn't get to the mailbox to put that ballot, the application in the mail if his life depended on it.
Wow.
It
Wow.
makes no sense. And so
Yeah.
what we
Well,
are forcing people to do is to lie. Because
yeah.
I've had people tell me, nobody's going to tell me I can't help my mother or my grandmother with the absentee ballot process. And we can't police it. And so people help others in good conscience. But then
Yeah.
you've got those organizations that will go out there and do it, in front of a storefront, who will no longer do that because they are afraid of being charged with a felony.
So let me just ask you before I forget, and by the way, it is so rare that I'm anymore in conversations with people where I am, quote, the youngest, that that I had to smile at that.
I think I got you by a few years.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. Looking at you and looking at me, I'm not so sure about that. But
Oh,
anyway,
you're kind. You're either kind or blind.
maybe both. I don't know. But let me say this. I am concerned about what else we can do to protect our right to vote. With, as Josh mentioned, the SAVES Act, your attempts at trying to get legislation passed that will help to protect our rights to vote. What else can we do? I mean, you've mentioned AlabamaVotes.gov. I'm glad you did. But what else can we do?
Well, first and foremost, we can encourage everybody we know to participate, in the process. Especially, well, it's not just younger voters. I mean, there are many people out there who just feel like their vote doesn't count. And we've got to convince them that their votes do count and that we do need them to participate in the process. Are we going to always is our candidate going to always win? No. But we have to keep the faith and continue to participate in the process. And then we need to encourage our state legislators, our Congress, members of Congress, to vote against the SAVE Act legislation at the federal level. We need to encourage them to vote in favor of early voting legislation at the state level. I have the honor of carrying a Alabama Voting Rights Act bill this session. I think I carried it the past 2 sessions as well. In the Senate is being carried by Senator Robert Stewart of Selma. But this particular legislation would include some of the provisions that we've already discussed, some of the separate bills that I've introduced. And we just need to get people. Today is Advocacy Day here at the state capitol. And so we have members of many advocacy groups here. I'm going to be addressing them briefly. And they are contacting their state legislators to let them know that Senator Stewart and myself, we're carrying this legislation on behalf of an organization called the Voting Rights Coalition. I don't know the total number of members combined, but it's an awesome group, and they have worked together on this bill. They didn't just hand it to me on a silver platter, but I had input as well because I wanted to make sure that the legislation included the provisions to make it easier for disabled voters to vote by absentee ballot. And it also has a provision for early voting in it. It also includes information about voter restoration. It should not be so difficult for people for ex-felons when they paid their dues. I mean, it takes an act of Congress for them to get registered or re-registered to vote in the state of Alabama. And so members of the Voting Rights Coalition are here today. They are walking the halls of the State House, talking to members of the state legislature. I don't know how many of us they'll catch up with because there are committee meetings, and then, of course, the House and the Senate will convene today. So we aren't always as accessible as people think we are when they come to the State House, because we're not just sitting in our offices. There's a lot of running around going on, but we need people to talk, and I tell my constituents when I see them at home and when they come here, look, I'm on your side. I'm the one carrying this legislation. Don't waste your breath on me. I need you to talk to other members of the Mobile County Legislative Delegation to convince them that this is what you want, not just what I want and what the Voting Rights Coalition wants and what Senator Stewart wants, but what the people want. And I think the more that all state legislators hear from the public, the better.
Yeah, that is definitely true. And listen, Representative Clarke, I know we've kept you a little longer than we had planned, and but listen, in our defense, we've kept you from lunacy. You know that. I mean, this is a much more pleasant conversation than anyone you're going to have the rest of the day.
No, actually, I'm going to meet with that group of members of the Voting Rights Coalition at 11:15. So
okay.
So that group aside.
Right. Well, that group aside, yeah, okay. I'll give them a pass. I'll give them a pass. But
thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
Listen, thank you so much for coming
Yes.
on and spending some time with us. Thank you for what you've been doing. Thank you for all the voting rights help and all the work that you're putting into this. I know it has to feel like banging your head against a wall, but we really do appreciate it, and I think that ultimately it's going to pay off, and it's going to be something that helps a lot of people at some point in the very near future, and we'll do anything we can to help you.
Let me tell you briefly that one of probably my landmark piece of legislation has been the Equal Pay Act. I did some research. I didn't realize when I carried that bill for the very first time how many had gone before me trying to get equal pay legislation passed in the state of Alabama. And I saw where possibly the first equal pay bill was introduced in the year 2001. I got that bill passed in 2019. Do the math.
Nice.
Do the math.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that
18 years
inspires
later,
me to keep working hard, to keep the
Right.
faith, and it's worth the effort.
Absolutely,
Awesome.
absolutely. It's just like the grocery tax. I'll never forget John
Yes.
Knight pushing that grocery tax bill back in the
Yes.
'90s, and
And even Alvin Holmes, the late Alvin
yes,
Holmes before him.
that's right.
Mm,
That is
Yes.
absolutely correct. Yeah, the two of them pushed that forever, and then it was like the Republicans discovered oil 2 years ago.
Well,
When they were oh look, we're going to cut the grocery tax by 1 penny. So
yeah.
it just hey, at some point, if you hit Republicans over the head enough with a good idea, eventually it sinks in after 20 or so years.
And gentlemen, I don't even care who gets the credit. They
Right.
can get credit for early voting. They just do it. Just do
Right.
it.
yeah.
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 Well, I hope that's the case. And listen, come back and join us again sometime.
Please.
We'll,
Yeah,
I
please.
promise. I
yes,
promise. I
ma'am.
enjoyed talking to the two of you. David,
We
Josh, thank you so much.
yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
thank you,
It
Representative.
was our pleasure. That is
Yeah.
Representative Adline Clarke. Really one of the best we got working for us. We're going to slide out. We're going to come back and wrap this thing up in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a moment.